Hey everybody, it's Jaime Flares. I am the founder of Sacred Heart Healing Arts. I'm gonna take these off because they are super glary. Sacred Heart Healing Arts, and today we are in our fourth of a five-part series called Cosmic Heart, your guide to astrology and relationships. So I will briefly just cover what we have explored so far in this series. If this is your first of the series, welcome, and I just want to let you know that there's a few videos that preceded this, and there will be one after this in this series. So here we are talking about relationships, and as I said before, we're looking at the primary relationship within ourselves, between the parts of ourselves and our relationship to self. And then we're also looking at our relationships as in partnerships, in our relationship with our beloveds, with our sacred others. So in our very first class, we talked about the moon and the south node and how they connect to our lineage, our past lives, our sort of default operating system in this lifetime, and then what we came in good at, what we came in as a comfort zone, set point. The second class, we talked about Venus and Mars and how they represent our inner feminine and inner masculine, how they also can represent, the woman or man we came to be on this path, and as well as what we're innately attracted to in partners. And we also talked about the sacred union within, which we're going to continue on a little bit more today. And then in the third class, we talked about our life path and the relationship axis as evidenced in an astrological chart, in our birth chart, by the rising and the descendant, or the ascendant and the descendant. So that's what we've been up to. I'm excited for this week. This week, we're going to get a little bit more refined, a little bit more specific, and we're going to look at an element of our charts that is not necessarily looked at very often. It's not one of the big hitters that we've explored so far. We're actually going to look at an asteroid called Juno. And before we get into talking about Juno and how she connects, how this sacred archetype connects to our relationships to self and other, I just want to give you a brief overview of the asteroids. So these are the asteroid goddesses that we'll be talking about. I'm actually just going to give you a brief overview of these. So this is a belt of planetary bodies that was discovered between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. So we're between those two major planets, and this is a series of asteroids, right, that live between them, more or less. And they were discovered originally. So one of the things that's cool about astrology and when things in the sky are discovered is that they often parallel. Again, this is going back to some of the principles of shamanic astrology, which I talked about in a previous video. As above, so below. So oftentimes the sky is not necessarily causing things to happen on Earth, having effects on Earth, but it's actually a reflection. So there have been these beautiful books written and lots of study done around what was happening on Earth when certain planetary bodies were discovered. And so with the asteroids were first discovered in the early 1800s, which also happened to coincide with the very first wave of feminism, the very first women's movement during the suffrage period, which was the early 1800s. They were first discovered then, these four primary ones. These were the first four that were discovered. There are more than that. But these first four, which we'll talk about, were discovered then. But they weren't really studied and understood to their fullest until the second wave of feminism. And it just so happened to coincide with that time of the second wave, which was in the 1970s, which is when astrologers began to better understand what these asteroids were all about, right? So we have four primary asteroids. These are the first four of this belt of planetary bodies between Mars and Jupiter that were discovered. And the first four were named after goddesses of antiquity. So we have Ceres, we have Pallas Athene, we have Juno, and we have Vesta. So, and I'll explain what each of these mean, but essentially, these have been seen and understood by humans who have witnessed them and have watched them and have learned from them and witnessed their reflection on Earth as they represent the archetypal feminine principle. Okay, so this feminine does not equal woman here. Feminine equals the feminine principle, the yin yang, the Shakti Shiva. This is the feminine principle that exists within men and women. So these are, as they've emerged in the sky, they've also paralleled an emergence in our consciousness. These are the new voices of the dormant feminine. So they've recently been activated in our collective, and they are seeking expression, recognition, understanding, and then integration within. So prior to this refinement or this filling out of the feminine principle as reflected in the cosmos, we had the moon, which kind of traditionally represented the mother and emotions, and we had Venus, which was associated with partnership, and the mate, right? Being a mate, being in relationship to a man. So these 4 archetypes come in, and there are more than those, but these 4 primary asteroid archetypes come in and refine the feminine principle, add to it, bring it into more fullness. So with Ceres, we have the mother-child archetype, we have the nurturing principle, we have unconditional love. So an aspect of the feminine that's brought out by this asteroid that's in a specific archetypal, more refined archetypal picture. Then we have Pallas Athene, and she represents the creative intelligence, the creative wisdom. She was born from the third eye, the head of Jupiter. So it's this mental creative principle. How is it expressed through us? Vesta is like the virgin. She represents focus, commitment, devotion. It's like, what are you devoted to? Vesta really illuminates that. And dedication to goals and aspirations. So Vesta is this experience of the feminine as whole unto herself. This healthy version of the archetype of the virgin. And then the last one, which is what I want to talk to you about a little bit today, is Juno. And Juno represents the sacred union. So again, kind of getting back to this Hieros Gamos idea, the sacred union between the masculine and feminine. And it comes in as related to our partnerships, in our committed relationships with a sacred other. So that's why we'll be focusing on Juno in this. So I could do a whole class, a whole series on the asteroids, and I would like to. That's my intention, is to dive in and talk about them more, because there's like a whole bunch more that I'm just skimming over right now about the asteroids. But I do want to zoom in on Juno a little bit, because Juno is the archetype of the sacred partnership. And so because we are here in the Cosmic Heart Astrology series, I wanted to focus in on her. Now, each of these aspects, because they're aspects of the self, they're aspects of the psyche, they're aspects of our feminine principle, they all will play a role, right? I mean, we could look at Ceres and we can talk about nurturing and how we receive and need nurturing, and how that potentially or does actually reflect our needs in partnership, right? Because nurturing is an aspect of our current conception of partnership. So how do we receive and give nurturance? Like, we could look at Ceres to that. But we will focus specifically on Juno today, because Juno is the archetype of the sacred union with a sacred other. So not just inside of ourselves, but actually with a sacred partner. So let's talk about Juno a little bit. So Juno is this goddess of antiquity from Roman times. Her equivalent in Greek antiquity is Hera. She is the goddess of marriage, the goddess of partnership, the queen of the heavens. So her symbol, if you want to go find her on your chart, it's the royal scepter. So it actually looks like a cross with like an asterisk above it. So that is the royal scepter. That is Juno. So if you want to play along, if you are playing along at home and you want to find Juno on your chart or on your partner's chart, you'll look for that symbol, and you can look at what sign it's in. And then also you can look at its house and what it's connected to. So we'll talk a little bit about what sign, what Juno represents in each of the signs, but there's more refinement that you could get into. So, okay, so Juno represents this polarity between intimacy and manipulation, right? So it's this whole, like, covers the whole of intimacy, and it's healthy and it's less than healthy components, right? It's a whole range. She represents the feminine, the principle of relatedness. This is the point on the astrological mandala, and the mandala that is created from these asteroids, where the feminine and the masculine come into union. So it's a really beautiful sacred place in the cosmos and inside of ourselves. So Juno represents this, that through the vehicle of committed partnership, we strive to realize sacred balanced union with another, with the sacred other. Juno is connected to, when it comes to the signs, is connected to both Libra, which is, kind of the essence of Libra is, equal conscious partnership, but it's also associated with Scorpio, which is the next sign in the zodiac. And Scorpio is about union, merging, sexuality. So Juno represents both of those aspects in combination. So sacred partnership, sacred sexuality, the merging of the two, right? So it looks at Juno's concerned with how do we use sexuality to transcend personal identity through sacred partnership, and how do we use sacred sexuality and sexual energy in a spiritual way within committed partnership. So this is like the Magdalene, Yeshua, divine feminine, masculine, Shiva Shakti dance, right? It's like, how do we do this inside of partnership? Juno also represents the yearning for mystical relationships that are emotionally, sexually, and psychologically fulfilling, which most of us in our current culture are seeking. So there's this active Juno archetype in our cultural conception of relationships right now. Now, I said before, it's the full range. So it also represents the shadow. So it is the wounding, the suffering, even the neuroses that can also happen when sacred union is denied or thwarted. So we can have aspects of jealousy and things like that that also may come to play within this archetype. So within our charts, Juno represents, so when we go to the chart, we look at Juno, like, what is she revealing to us there? Well, one of the things she's revealing to us is the needs that motivate us into relationship, into sacred partnerships. So it can also, that's the primary thing, and that's what I want to just briefly talk through each of the signs and what the needs, the primary relationship needs are. So we're just adding another layer on to this layering process that we've been doing about how to look at self and other within a relationship, and these different pieces that sort of lend information to the puzzle, to the picture that we're creating about ourselves in relationship and about our partners in relationship, so we can honor everyone more fully. Okay, that's what we're up to. So Juno in the chart is about our needs, the needs that motivate us into relationship, okay? In transit, so as Juno moves through the sky and interfaces with our natal chart, it can sometimes be an indicator of the beginnings and endings of relationships in our life. Sometimes Juno can activate or tell, reflect the beginnings of relationships, the ends of relationships, things like that. It can also indicate compatibility in a chart. And sometimes it can represent our mate or the qualities we project onto our mate. So what archetype this Juno asteroid is in. Okay, so I want to just briefly talk through each of the astrological, the zodiac signs. And just briefly, this is super high level. We're going to talk about what needs are motivating partnership for each of these signs. So again, there's layers here. This is more complicated than I'm going to present it to be, but I just want to give you a little, the intention here is to give you some nuggets so that you can go to your chart, you can find Juno, you can go to your partner's chart, you can find Juno, and you can add this layer on to the bigger picture we're creating through this course of what is my nature, what is my relationship to relationships, right? Within myself and then within partnership with others. Okay, so I'm going to go through the zodiac starting with Aries. So people who have Juno in Aries often are motivated by the need for independence and freedom within relationships. So those aspects are really important to their experience of relationship. With Taurus, Taurus is motivated by the needs for stability, for groundedness, for solid presence, also for sensuality. So a real beingness in the body together in partnership. Gemini is sort of the mind, the creativity, creative muse. So for Gemini and Juno, these are people who need verbal stimulation and exchange within a relationship. With Cancer, there's often a need, so to be in relationship is the needs that are motivating relationship are emotional closeness and intimacy. So those two really need to be essential to partnership in order for a Juno in Cancer to really feel fulfilled. Juno in Leo is all about experiencing admiration and excitement, right, within relationship, like this radiance. For Virgo, now there's sort of this Western astrology conception of Virgo as like the perfectionist. I like to see it a little bit differently. There can be a perfectionist quality here where Virgo and Juno might want to like have a desire to manifest to like the ideal partnership. But also Virgo, especially in more shamanic astrology, is more about sacred space. So relationship would have to offer sacred space, as well as just honor sacred work, one another's sacred work. So that would have to be present within relationship. Those needs to have sacred relationship honored, sacred work honored, excuse me, and to experience sacred space, relationship as sacred space. For Libra, so those with Juno in Libra needs equality, friendship, fairness, and partnership. There needs to be consciousness in their relating. For Scorpio needs emotional and sexual intensity and intimacy within partnership, within relationship. Those are some of their driving needs. For Sagittarius, there's intellectual stimulation. It's a little bit different than Gemini. It's more like relationship has to bring a sense of adventure and exploration and discovery and truth. Like relationship has to bring meaning to life for the Sagittarius, for the Juno and Sagittarius. For Capricorn, Junos often need stability, responsibility, groundedness, depth, security within a relationship. Those are some of the driving needs to create a stable structure within relationship, using relationship to create that stable structure that will benefit self and present, and then also the future generations. Aquarius, so Juno in Aquarius often reveals the needs for freedom, sovereignty, the ability to have a life outside of relationship, to be an individual. And then lastly, Pisces. So Juno in Pisces would reveal that the driving needs of relationship are to realize the highest ideals through partnership. So how do we realize like the highest self, the highest visions, the highest version of partnership within? So that is a very quasi-quick, not so quick, run through of Juno and how Juno shows up in the chart and how it connects to this puzzle that we're putting together piece by piece around relationships and how they're revealed through astrology. So the takeaway really is to go check out your own chart, check out Juno, check out this refinement. So we looked at the moon, we looked at Venus. Those are some those are the original feminine archetypes. So now we're sort of refining with these asteroids, specifically looking at Juno. So you can go in, you can kind of see, okay, Juno, where is Juno in my chart? You might also look at what house it's in. That's something we haven't covered. There are ways to refine it and see what other planets are next to it, that sort of thing. So those are all things that you can get support with through an astrologer to fully get the whole picture. And that's something I offer. I offer relationship readings specifically, but then also just general chart readings, chart sessions. I call them soul map sessions because we're really mapping the architecture of your soul. We're not mapping it. We're actually just looking at the map. We're reading the map together. And you can find out more about those on sacredhearthealingarts.com. The other thing you can do while you're there is that I do have a free ebook about what this series is on. So it is called, just like this video series is called Cosmic Heart, Your Guide to Astrology and Relationships. So you can go and download that for free. Joining and taking advantage of this ebook also puts you in connection with me so that I can share any upcoming goodness with you, upcoming series, upcoming offerings, things like that. So thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciated sharing another aspect of astrology and relationships with you. I truly hope that if you found it interesting, I'd love to hear any comments you have, any questions, any reflections as you look at your own chart or your partner's chart and how this adds to our picture. And I will see you next week. Next week will be our last in the series. And we're going to talk, my plan is for us to talk about past lives and how the chart can indicate past life karmic connections with partners. So that's going to get a little trickier. It's going to be a little bit harder for us to fully look at together because this gets into synastry, which is looking at two charts together. But I'm going to go over that a little bit with you and just trust that you can get something from it and that you may be able to, I can talk to you about how to put the charts together so you can see. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I look forward to connecting with you soon. Be well.